Morning, everyone. Let's give another 5 minutes for everyone to join us, and then we'll start the webinar. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my another episode of our webinar series in the Dynamics 365 space, where this time we'll be talking about team member licensing enforcement. My name is Sunny Prince. The temperature outside is 17 degrees, at least in my area, and it's raining. I hope everyone is keeping themselves safe and warm in these critical times from wherever you are joining. So as usual, I'll be keeping this presentation a short one to highlight what is important for you to know, just to make sure that it's not extending beyond the time limit. A quick brief of myself. So I started working in the Microsoft Dynamics 365 space 16 years back. Then it was called Dynamics CRM. Um, I've been involved in enabling businesses to get up to speed in the D365 space. I continue to work with partners and customers to drive efficient ways of working in technically enabling them and best practices, sharing best practices to grow their practices and also provide impactful outcomes to both the partner businesses as well as customers they serve. So most of my webinars, if you can see, are partner driven based on their on-demand requests. So from my last webinar where I talked about licensing updates, post that I received quite a few partners requesting me to do a webinar on team member licensing updates. So this is the result of that. And before we get started, I would like to make some housekeeping announcements. So this session is getting recorded and the recording will be made available for on-demand viewing after today's webinar. If you face any audio or video issue, then please post your query in the Q&A panel and one of my team members will address it. Also, if you have any technical questions, please feel free to ask those as well. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so this is the agenda for today's webinar. So we'll be talking about what is D365 team member license. So I understand there might be quite a few members who are not aware of exactly what is the D365 team member license. So I'll give a quick definition what exactly that is, and then followed by that, I will be explaining about the upcoming enforcements and things that you need to know, and then how you can evaluate those enforcements and the impact, and how you can reassess and do a bit of a architecturing of your environment. And then the next would be to understand the timeline of the enforcement and how you can prepare with those changes that are coming. Okay, next slide. Okay, so let's talk about what exactly is Dynamics 365 team member license. So here we are talking about, as I said, the licensing definition. So team member license in Dynamics 365 is meant for users that don't need full user capabilities, but still need to access information within D365 ecosystem. So earlier, before team members were introduced, we just had the standard user cals. So Microsoft, they came up with this bright idea that, hey, why don't we help customers save some money by introducing that team member license? So in that way, the license was introduced in the D365 space. So in this webinar, we'll be talking about the changes and the reinforcements that are coming, and the changes only impacts Dynamics 365 sales, customer service, and project service automation online customers who have the new team member licenses. So yeah, no one has to panic on these changes. The changes are just, as I mentioned, just for these 3 apps. But then other than that, business is as usual. The modules are generally available starting from April 1st, 2020, and the scope of today's webinar is also around these three apps. So there will be the possibility to customize the sales team member and the customer service team member app modules, and so with the project service member app. But for example, as per the new restriction in these apps, you're not allowed to bring more than 15 additional entities, and that can be your common data structure, core entities, services, which we'll be talking about later in this session. Also, the new team member license user will not have access to custom applications. So that is something you have to bear that in mind. So the alternate option is to have, Power Apps license. Power Apps license do grant you similar read access rights to any entities within the environment as team member does. So the restrictions revolve more around the restricted entities. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. So a little bit more information on the team member license. So as I was mentioning earlier, that team member license is really designed for broad access across the apps with the light usage scenarios of Dynamics data. So you have full read access across all Dynamics applications. Okay, I'm sure I made that clear. And however, it is not to be used for a specific function. Therefore, it gives you a broad read access and so a limited write access to Dynamics data. So from a limited perspective, what I meant is, for example, a self-service staff with a D365 team member license will only be able to create a case or even update your own employee information at the time and expense for the time and expense, but not able to support other staff with you can say technical issues or any other assistance that they may require. So a team member user will not have access to custom applications or provided administrative privileges. So in this context of what the license is used for, I guess it's pretty consistent and no use rights have been changed around the technical enforcement. So as I mentioned earlier, there's no other change other than the enforcements. And for additional information, please do refer to the licensing guide for all the use rights. Okay, so let's move on. Next slide. So let's talk about what the reinforcement is all about here in this slide. So with Dynamics 365 becoming more, app-based rather than a platform, model-driven applications are being also split out so that users can only need to see the applications that they work with. Example, sales and customer service, etc. Like something that fall under this ecosystem, or even model-driven Power Apps. So as part of this, those with just a team member license will now see a different app, and full users will see the customer service hub or the sales hub or even the project hub, which is with respect to the project automation services. And while team members will see a customer service team member app, or can be even the sales team member app or the project service automation app. So that is some of the changes or the reinforcements that will be taking place. So let's move on. So let's talk about the Dynamics 365 portfolio. And so under this new SKU placement, as you can see, under the customer engagement and unified operations modules, will have the full users and the additional users, where the devices, activity, and team member license will fall in, which I would also call them as light users. So as I mentioned, team members will have the read access other than the three apps that were shipped as part of the new enforcements, where you can users under these three applications can do additional customizations and have access to 15 additional entities. Okay, so in this slide, let's talk about the enforcement details. So okay, so as I was mentioning earlier about the enforcement details, so as part of the enforcement, there are 3 apps that were shipped, and of the 3, only customer service and sales are the new ones, and project resource as already was existing. So if you look at the screen on the right side, this is how typically your experience would be if you install all the applications that you would have access to. So a team member would also get access to all these apps. With these app modules, Microsoft has also shipped a customizable security role that allows you to make changes as needed to suit your business needs. But as these changes have to be in the realm of user rights, but there is no enforcement and you are able to change them. So what was shipped with these app modules are subsets of Dynamics 365 entities that are largely aligned with the user rights mentioned in the licensing guide. So there are some restrictions on these modules where you are not allowed to, for example, bring more than 15 additional entities, and that can be common data services core entities that already exist in the platform, or it can be custom entities, or it can also be a combination of both. So now during early access, you can definitely try out these app modules. So they were released during the month of April, and I don't think there is any restriction per se to other apps, which means you can use these apps side by side to evaluate your needs if something breaks. You can always fall back to using your previous app, but after the enforcement starts, your access gets restricted to only these 3 designated apps, which is shipped on the early release cycles by Microsoft. So we'll be talking about when the timelines after this on when the reinforcements are really going to kick in. Now, outside of these app enforcements, there are other ways through which the product can be accessed or continued to be accessed. There's a report made available in the Power Platform Admin Center under the CDS Analytics section, where you can, actually go and look at what are the general entities and the operations that your users with team members are accessing. And again, please note that it is not an API statistics or usage statistics. It is, well, generally related to providing for you to look at it as a guidance, so that you know largely what are the apps that are in question that are being non-compliant, or what are the entities and operations that you need to tweak in the architecture to make them compliant. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so this screen talks about the errors that will appear as part of post-enforcement timeline. So these are we'll be talking about some of the general errors that you should expect from the enforcement the moment it kicks in. The error on the left side of the screen, if you can look at it, is actually the runtime error, which you would see if you had bookmarked some of the custom applications or the enterprise applications that you as a team member now do not have access to. Well, in such cases, you would see that invalid license error is much more generic as you go on building more applications that will be behind a certain license entitlement. Um, you would see this error message popping up with a corresponding app that you need access to and the corresponding licenses that you should be having to access those apps. But for the purpose of the team member license enforcement, system will clearly say, it will clearly state whichever app you are accessing, it will call out the license that you need to have for accessing that specific application. So in addition to the 3 modules that were shipped with the restriction on the 15 entities that Microsoft has done, so what Microsoft has done is to apply some safeguards, into that app designer and the solution import framework, where if you try to add more than 15 entities and try to save and publish the app, the owner of the solution would see this error so that they know they are not publishing uh, out an app which is largely non-compliant with the licensing guidelines, and hence protect runtime users from any impact. So this message would appear as a pop-up message, and that will give them an indication that that is not compliant and they have to make changes to their work. Okay, so how to access, so in this slide we'll be talking about how to access the impact. So as we narrow down the path of how you would look at user population and see how or who are going to be impacted. So the first thing you can rule out is if you have an on-premise version, you don't have to worry at this moment because this license enforcement is not being applied to on-premise versions and affects only the online version. So customers who have got the legacy classic mode or the UCI, Unified Client Interface, will be affected. This license enforcement is very focused on team member licenses only, and this enforcement is applicable to the new SKU which were released after October 2018, which means if you have um, users who are on the old SKU of the team member, they should not see any impact up until they are up for renewal on their subscription. So that means even within an organization, you may have a mixture of old and new SKUs, but it's only the new users who might feel the impact of the license enforcement. Another point actually to note in the license enforcement is that as you saw the apps in the previous screens, they are only a product of the unified client interface, which means once you move to UCI, automatically the license enforcements will kick off, which anyways you have to take action on because UCI migration is also planned to be enforced as of, I guess it's October 1st. So by then, when you log in, you would see that you have to log into unified interface. Another announcement that I guess everyone would know by now is that existing customer organizations would get an additional grace period all the way up till 31st of January 2021, because earlier Microsoft had announced it to be 1st of October 2020. So now it's being extended now by another few months to give adequate time to figure out what's the best path for the clients. So what does it mean for the customer? So how does it impact? What are the things they should know? So so for clients, they might have to look into their apps platform license, or they might need to upgrade into a pro or professional or a enterprise license, or maybe just re-architect some of their applications to, to be largely in compliant, or move over their customizations. All the details that I am talking about and all the communications will be updated on the link shown below, as you can see on the screen, which is aka.ms slash team member apps. So you can see the SKU description given out below. Microsoft, it tries to put as much description to help you understand which one is an older version and which one is a new one. So in that way, you can distinguish the old versus the new one. Okay, moving on. Oops, did I skip a slide? Okay, let's talk about the timelines and milestones. So what happened was last year during the month of August 2018, the internal and external webinars were conducted by Microsoft to communicate on the team member licensing changes. And then after that, during the month of September, the field alert communications went out as part of the warning. And then during the month of October, team member use rights were updated, and the new team member licenses were launched. So then from January 2020, the telemetry reports were released, as I mentioned before, where you get guidance on the team member usage and compliance. Early February, we went into the early access phase to team modules for the 2020 release wave 1 set capabilities. So as part of that early access, you can install the new team member apps and you can play around with them, customize it. It was during this phase you could see both the new set of apps as well as any existing apps until the enforcements will be kicking in. And on the 1st of April, the enforcements, and the new licensings were kicked in for customers on the new team member SKUs for new organization instances tied to the 2020 release wave 1. So I guess enough time has been given. If we have new customers coming in, then they should automatically be on the new SKUs and should know about the enforcement starting April 1st. And for the existing customers who are deciding to spin up a new organizational instance, again, there's enough time given for them too. So considering the current situation with the pandemic situation that's happening around the world, Microsoft, they felt that it's best to give customers, partners, as well as field individuals like me, sufficient time to work with the customers on, migrating or moving them over to the new app modules. So the grace period has been extended from earlier it was September 30. Now the grace period has been given till January 2021, allowing for a few more months where customers can do the needful to adopt to the new app modules. Okay. So how can you prepare? So if you have an affected team member license, you may have already received an email from Microsoft titled Team Member License Enforcement in the form of an email with this message. So in order to prepare for this new team member licensing, what we would recommend you is start reviewing your licenses. So assess what licenses you have across your organization and determine who needs access to what. Enabling the early preview. So around this, the early access for Wave 1 2020 is now available, and you can enable that new team member license to test what you can and cannot do. Give time for testing. So give sufficient time to test what impacts the license changes mean to you, what functionality is lost or missing from your ecosystem or from the architecture, and then you can customize the access to custom entities as required, up to, as I said earlier, 15 maximum now, or review if enhanced licensing is needed here. And then evaluate your licensing options. So if the changes do not give suitable permissions, then evaluate your options for sales and customer service access. There is professional and enterprise licensing competency as well. So, or you may be able to review Power Apps licensing as well, depending on the nature of your requirement. And then the last is plan your communications with your end customer. So as a team member, experience will be a little different. It is wise to communicate the changes to users so that they are prepared for the change. Okay. So moving on, so these are some of the resources that I will be sharing with everyone, where you can receive all the information as a partner and also as a Microsoft field about the licensing changes post 2018 April last year, sorry, October last year. You can also access the licensing guide and the pricing and licensing deck from the links that are being given. Also, you can access technical details on the Dynamics 365 team members and the customer service team member and the project resource hub modules that have been launched as part of the shipping. And then if you have any questions, of course there is the Microsoft Field Yammer, where uh, potential partners, they post their questions and it's always addressed by one of the team community members or even by Microsoft. Or you can even post it from your partner, Microsoft partner community. And then you also, in addition to that, you also have resources related to your licensing and pricing. So there's one section for partner, and then the other one is for external. You have all the Power Apps and Business Central licensing guide, as I've been sharing along. So that's with the resources. And okay, so we have reached the end of the webinar. So I'll give few minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to post that in the chat window. And as I mentioned, one of my team members will pick that up, and I'll try to address that. So I'll give a few minutes and see if you have any questions. More than happy to address it. Okay, so I received one question. It says, that. Can I renew my old team member licenses? So yes, so you can renew your old team member license until now it's, I guess, December 2020. I guess earlier it was June 2020, but now it is extended to December 2020, where you can renew your um, team member license. But post that date, you or your client with whom you are working will need to transition into the new SKUs, um, and that will be subject to enforcement. Okay, that it is, that's it. That brings us to the end of our webinar. The next will be, please take some moment to participate in our polling session. We need your valuable inputs on how we can proceed. And we will be collecting all your answers through this poll link session. And please do let us know. Thanks for attending the webinar. So we received one question. Sorry, I'm in the middle of this poll, and the question is, I don't know if it's a question, but it says the 15 extra entities only applies to the app. You can have more as lookups. Yes, so as long as, yeah, your access is tied to the entity, the core entity, but lookups, subgrids, you can still have access on a read basis. So as long as you have the read access to the lookups and subgrids, yes, you can gain access. But with respect to the 15 custom entities, you can still update, write, edit on the specific 3 app modules, if that makes sense. Okay, that brings us to the end of the session. Thanks, guys. Time to wind up. Thanks for your time. Appreciate. I hope keep yourself safe and warm during these winter times. Thanks.